Hello and welcome to today's MSSQLtips.com webcast. Gain insight with email verification tools for SSIS. As some people might know, there's far more to email verification than just a binary valid or invalid verdict. Definitely a lot more. In today's session, Valentine Bradoff will cover the world of email verification using an API as well as SSIS to verify your emails and show you how to implement your own solution using global email from Melissa. In today's session, Valentine will cover the world of email verification, using SSIS to verify your emails, implementing your own solution, using global email results, and the potential for data enrichment with other Melissa data products. In terms of housekeeping items for today, please keep in mind today's session will be recorded and a follow-up email will be sent to all attendees after the webcast to continue your learning. If you have any technical difficulties or questions during the webcast, please post them in the Q&A portion of your GoToWebinar controls. We'll have Valentine answer as many questions as possible during the Q&A portion of today's webcast, so please stay tuned. Valentine, can you please take away from here and help educate the community?
Yes, hello everybody. I'm Valentine Bradoff. I'm a sales engineer at Melissa Data and the product manager for our email verification service, Global Email. As a company, Melissa focuses on global contact data, the cleansing, managing, verifying, etc. We have 35 years of industry experience with providing data quality tools for our many clients from a wide range of sectors, everything from institutions, business to consumer, and even other data management companies. Today, I'll be focusing on global email. Much like our products that deal with physical addresses or human names, global email enables you to cleanse and verify email addresses. While email verification is not quite as granular as, say, address verification, there's still a lot to discuss, as Jeremy mentioned. Here's what we'll be discussing today. I'll just start with some background on email verification in general and how I approach the task. Then we'll look at from your perspective, the client's perspective, which brings its own set of challenges. And finally, we'll see how Global Email 621 provides solutions, and 2, add even more value to your now cleansed and verified emails, all within SQL Server. Emails are a relatively simple form of data. They have just 2 parts and a small definitive set of syntax rules, but they are no less important than other more complex data. Email is still the standard line of communication between businesses and consumers, or potential consumers, and one of the main ways to establish a person's identity and relationship with a business. So here's a quick overview of the stages of email verification. Basically, emails are cleaned up and verified at 2 levels. Syntax, RFC standards, and even domain checks can all be implemented locally with simple string processing and database lookups. The later stages, real-time verification requires reaching out to the domain and/or MX servers, which introduces some variables we'll discuss shortly, but yields definitive results. And ideally, it will be possible to verify the individual mailbox, but there is one common wrinkle here to be discussed shortly. This is pretty generic other than the cache check in the second stage. That refers to our in-house cache of nearly 800 million emails. Other services have their own methods of caching, of course. Everyone does it, but that's just the stage we do it at. So going back to the beginning, when you get a list of emails from some source, I'm sure I don't need to tell you that, well, anything is possible. Anything from leading or trailing characters, illegal characters, things that I tend to call garbage input, basically anything. These small initial steps of cleansing form a first line of defense against obviously bad data and set us up for success in subsequent steps, even if the emails are just destined to be written to a new list for the time being. For full verification, though, we have to reach out. First, we check the domain or MX server. This is essentially like an uptime check, so a negative result is quite definitive. An email with a bad domain is bad, regardless of the individual mailbox. A positive result enables us to move on to mailbox level verification, but this is where email verifiers encounter wrinkles. Between variation in speed, variation in response types, and even rare cases of incorrectly configured servers, calling out to external servers for email verification is hardly different from dealing with any other third-party service. Now, when I was first learning about email verification, I came into it wondering why can't everyone just send a quick confirmation email when needed, something with a confirmation link and a friendly landing page. While this is standard for a lot of account creation processes, my question did not take into account the need for mass email verification at speed. These brute force methods, as I like to call them, range from futile and wasteful to actually illegal. At best, such methods involve sending emails to many invalid addresses, and at worst, it could run afoul of anti-spam laws and regulations. Again, since this is part of real-time verification, it's just like dealing with a third-party service, and verifiers like us have to work within certain bounds. The more enterprising among us may be thinking something like, can I do this all in-house? Well, yes, I mean, we do it, but there is a reason there are whole companies that devote themselves to just this task. The world of email is less than friendly to verifiers like us. We have to deal with a host of external limitations, blacklisting, graylisting, overzealous anti-spam measures. These things may not completely stonewall verification, but they do make it a lot slower and more difficult. Even a quite lean verification system can run afoul of such countermeasures if it's not implemented and managed properly. And finally, there is a specific and unfortunately quite common type of email that is problematic within the entire field of email verification. And that type of email is called accept all, also known as catch-all. This is unfortunately a variable that is completely out of control of any third-party email verifier. Email providers, such as the ones whose logos are shown to the right, set up their service in a way that makes it hard for external verifiers to fully discern the validity of an email. In addition to the picture providers and any other domains owned by them, such as everything Verizon owns, it's a common problem in various other types and subtypes of emails. You see a lot with government emails, corporate emails, which Microsoft owned. In fact, our company emails are accept all, ironically. The small silver lining here is that it's not at all hard to identify when an email is accept all. No email provider is ambiguous about it. They don't try to hide it. It's a simple but morally effective privacy measure, whether it's explicitly used for that or not. But in the end, it's just a small problem for verifiers. Of course, it's not all bad news. These are all long existing industry-wide problems, so there are many known approaches to them. For the blacklisting and graylisting problem, we, as a company, maintain many servers and proxies around the world to distribute the work of our email verification. When we do run into problems with blacklisting and graylisting, some minimal human intervention is needed to file a request for removals and/or tweak settings. Internally, we are constantly developing novel approaches to problems. I am personally involved with or in charge of multiple ongoing projects to this end, namely these two. AI scoring. We're not quite the first to apply AI to email verification, but we will be the first to do it in real time. Our market research shows that the only existing AI email scoring is done via batch upload, where you have a list of emails, you send it to them, they do, and they send it back to you at some later time. And the second one, fraud detection, we will repackage select information that's usually reserved for internal use for clients in sensitive or high stakes fields such as finance, medical, big tech, so that they can be more confident in both us as a verifier and in our results. So we've about covered the complaints from the perspective of email verifiers. Now we'll talk about the client's problems. While most, if not all, business problems boil down to money, arguably, I think of email-related pain points in terms of these three categories: miscommunication or failed communication, fraud from low stakes to high stakes, and cascading costs. I specify cascading since it is hard to understate the potential for damage from bad data. So, miscommunication, or even worse, failed communication. When we receive email lists from clients for our professional services jobs, we tend to find that most lists are at least 1/4 bad, and lists that are half bad or more are not uncommon either. Without verification, imagine even just a quarter of a mass email campaign not getting delivered at all. That's 25% of the overall effort that could have been actually utilized on good verified emails. And if you get lucky with a list that's say just 10 to 15% bad, if that list is just a list of emails, wouldn't you want to know a little more about the people behind those emails? Imagine an email campaign with a low failure rate, except half of it was sent to people with neither need nor interest in the content of your campaign. Most people do just ignore irrelevant emails, but there's a small minority that cannot be discounted with whom you will negatively engage. In the worst case, a total lack of email verification costs you money whenever the emails are used. From the beginning, a bad email gets inserted to your database. Somebody is able to use yet another fake email to get 10% off their quote unquote first order from your company. Or even worse, someone is able to use an email created in bad faith to route personal information away from the intended recipient. In terms of email campaigns, just one mismanaged campaign can do lasting damage. The first obvious cost is opportunity cost, lost opportunity with leads or prospects. In the midterm, you'll have some cleanup to do, such as filing requests to get off blacklists, as we mentioned before, and working to fix your unjustified reputation as a spammer. In the long term, the problems I just mentioned will compound on themselves, of course, but then you'll have more problems, decreased revenue, natural data degradation happens no matter what, and if nothing is done to fix or counteract it, you'll just keep going around and around, spiraling down. Another potential cost is a reputation, specifically your reputation as a sender, and more correctly, the reputation of your IP address or addresses. If you gain a bad reputation, even emails sent to good active email addresses, excuse me, email addresses, will be flagged as spam and relegate to spam folders more frequently if they get delivered at all. But all this is avoidable. We like to encapsulate the benefits of proactive data management in our 110-100 rule, as in it costs $1 to manage data starting from its point of entry, when a user provides an email to you, for instance, $10 to management in kind of a piecemeal fashion internally when you have maybe some internal flow and you have existing databases, something like that. Or you can take at least $100 in damages from bad, unclean, unverified data. And all this can have immediate good impacts. Good email campaigns routinely double click-throughs and significantly decrease churn, or the amount of people unsubscribing from the newsletter, for example. All right. Now, how do we use our solutions to solve these problems? Among our competitors, we are known for returning an encyclopedia of results. It is a rare client that utilizes every field in our responses, but they're there if you need them. Our result codes are the main entry point into our results. Result codes are alphanumeric codes, 2 letters and 2 numbers, such as ES01, that enable most any type of analysis. In addition to telling you about your data, we choose to reveal one interesting tidbit of information to clients that is usually kept secret by other verifiers, as far as I know. We tell you when our results are from a real-time check or retrieved from our cache, the one I mentioned earlier with nearly 800 million emails. And this cache is kept fresh by various backend processes, and it's designed to deliver you accurate results, but at the speed of retrieving a record from a cache as opposed to reaching out to who knows what servers and doing a real-time check. Another feature that is exclusive to our global email is the deliverability confidence score. This is just a single number derived from our result codes. The result codes are still included, of course, but you can use a single number as an even simpler and quicker way to judge an email. Finally, we also return whois data, such as domain creation date, domain age and days, if the domain is available, etc. This is a subset of our result codes, just some of the more common and useful ones. ES stands for email status, EE stands for email error, as you may have guessed. And this is about the extent of the result codes you would check for a moderately granular analysis, more than you need for something like an onboarding page, but a little short of a deep dive for putting together the best possible list for a big email campaign. And you'll notice that there are only 4 error codes. As I mentioned, emails are a relatively simple form of data, so the possible errors are blessedly few in number and definitive in nature. Bad syntax, no two ways about that. Bad domain or bad MX server, and a bad mailbox or an invalid mailbox. As for valid, you can see there are possible gradations to valid. Not all of these gradations are relevant to all use cases, as we'll see, but we generally advise most clients to at least account for these, even if they don't do much of anything with them in their current use case. You'll recognize accept all, result code ES07 from before, and I'll discuss some other notable codes shortly. But before we analyze and use our codes, we should codify our use case or use cases. I've outlined these 3 broad use cases here, but like everything else, it can get quite complex and intertwined in practice. Onboarding, or a point of entry, tends to be a use case that prioritizes speed, whether an email is validated as soon as the user clicks in the next text box or clicks next button. Therefore, syntax and the simple absence of problems can be the main judgment. Marketing use cases usually require more thought. Even for a list of emails gathered from an onboarding process that itself uses our global email, we do recommend a second sweep, as in sending them through global email again, or at least a deeper dive into analysis of our result codes. The main nuance here goes back to accept all again, but there are other less common result codes to consider as well. Enrichment tends to be a self-contained process, not done in real time. It can be theoretically, but that's just the most common use cases. We'll discuss the possibilities here near the end of the presentation, but in general, the main consideration here is just starting with a cleansed list. And while a rundown of how to utilize our result codes is a bit beyond the scope of this webinar, I selected a few to illustrate how there are gradations of validity that can mean different things in different situations. I also intend to show this table I also intend this table to show the importance of keeping track of our full results for the entire life of an email in your possession. I don't know of any client that just discards our results, but it's an important point to make. Anyway, we have here full result codes and what they mean in the same three broad use cases discussed previously. For an onboarding process, our results can be used almost in a binary fashion, as long as you're not discarding our full results again. And if it's a low-stakes signup, it could be feasible to simply check for the presence of ESO1 and the absence of the ESO6 code or any EE code. However, if you're building a list for marketing, ESO1 is just a first step. ESO6 and error codes are still hard-nosed, of course, but some other codes like ESO7 and ESO9 could be causes for concern. You'll see ESO9 means that the individual owner of the email is known to report spam at a higher than average frequency. Except all emails have an element of uncertainty, as previously discussed, and of course ESO9 means the person themselves is problematic, which is a concern for email campaigns because if you send to a lot of people, you'll just get report for spam, and again, you'll get a bad reputation, and all those problems just compound. Finally, for enriching, even an email that is no longer active, say it comes back with a EEO4, that could still be used as enrichment centroid, as we call it, because it could be sitting somewhere in our reference data attached to a name and address and or phone number. ESO7 is largely irrelevant. ESO9, it's not relevant to whether or not you should actually use it, but it could have some interesting uses if you need to evaluate the timeliness of the data. For instance, an email that's long inactive probably wouldn't have ESO9 because no one's using it and no one would be reporting spam. But that's a little specific. These are general, of course. So let's see some actual results. This is just a few data points from a recent list we processed. You'll notice the percentages don't quite add up to 100. I just drew out the most important ones. Every list is different, of course. This one had a notably low percentage of accept all emails, for example. This is largely due to our recent improvements with how we handle accept all emails. But like I said, every list is different. The low spam trap percentage is normal. Unless we're working with a list from a really dubious source, it's not common for users to provide spam trap emails in an onboarding or subscription process unless they are actively vindictive against you. And finally, the low invalid percentage is also a bit below average. This just means that the list was already moderately good before this. But of course, you always want to verify your emails. Excuse me. And then here's a couple examples of our domain correction in action. This option can be turned off or on. It's on by default, but it just corrects common typos. For instance, GMA8L, the 8 is just above the I on a standard keyboard. Hot MSIL goes to Hotmail, things like that. So we've discussed how to use results. We will now see how to gather those results. I'll be demoing via SSIS shortly, but I just want to quickly cover the web service itself first, which is what SSIS calls behind the scenes. Of course, you're able to use it directly yourself. If you want or need to use a web service directly, it's easy to use in any modern language or stack. You just have to be able to send REST and or POST requests and receive JSON and or XML responses. And a global email has several options available to the client, both with a web service directly and in SSIS. They're fully implemented in both, of course. The main one is we offer two levels of verification, Express and Premium. Express is basically just a syntax check, standardization, and our cache check. Very few of our clients use Express alone unless they already have a list that they've run through us and they want to just make sure our cache hasn't changed that much, something like that. Premium starts with the same checks as Express, but goes beyond to real-time checks as needed, like we discussed previously. Domain correction, like I just mentioned, allows you to actively disable our domain correction if you want to. It's on by default again. Time to wait is a setting that sometimes takes some tinkering. It defaults to 25, which is usually a good balance between allowing for difficult to verify emails, with slow MX servers, for example, and a reasonable total processing time if you're doing a huge list. We usually advise clients to set this as high as the situation allows, of course, but again, the default is a good compromise between speed and allowing us to handle external wrinkles. And we do return who is data by default, but you can disable that if you need to avoid clutter or optimize the response size by a tiny bit. The difference in performance is negligible on your end. And here's a very simple example of calling our API from Python code. You may want to think of this as just a bare bones example of how you might put this in an existing onboarding process, or maybe even a script component SSIS if you want to implement some logic that's not possible with just SSIS. But it's very easy. Just have the URL, a few parameters, and then get back a JSON response. Not much to say there, really. But now, since this is an SSIS webinar, let's talk about the SSIS component. It's components, actually, but the main one for using just global email to its full potential is Global Verify. It implements all 4 of our main data cleansing services: name, address, phone, and email. But of course, today's about email. And all our SSIS components are optimized for speed with multiple versions of SQL Server, 2012, 14, 16, 17, and 19. And their output can be blended seamlessly with any output received when using the web services directly. And as you'll see in just a moment, any novice SSIS user can have an email-only solution up and running in minutes. If you already have the email list and output destination ready, the biggest time investment here is really just typing in the names of all the output columns. And even that can be done automatically via config files. So I'll just switch to SSIS real quick. And wow, I'm so sorry. Visual Studio is being stupid like it does. That's good at least. I'm so sorry. I ran this right before the project, and now it's not working.
Do you want to restart it real quick, Valentine, and
Yeah, I
see
just
if we
have to go
can?
into Task Manager here because.
Okay. Well, while Valentine's doing that, just so everyone knows, we do have some information in the handout section of the GoToWebinar controls. So if you're interested in some of this email verification that's available from Melissa, there's actually 4 PDFs there that are available. One about getting started with global email validation, that is, where you can go ahead and take a look at that, get some information related to how you can get started in your organization, something too you can pass along to members of your team as well as your management. There's also a PDF related to all the products that are available from Melissa, and I know Valentine's going to cover a little bit of that today with the Verify. We also have a best practices PDF as well as an SSIS brochure. So appreciate everybody being patient with us
Yeah,
as
I'm very
we.
sorry about this. Just Visual Studio. I'm sure everyone's dealt with this. I've talked with multiple colleagues and even my father about how Visual Studio just dies sometimes.
All right, let's see if it gets you back up and running.
Anyway, when it comes up, it's just a simple sample project. You'll see. Good. Thank goodness. You'll see in the data flow here when it switches. All right, so input list of emails, like it says there. Global verify, where we have global email, and then I just split it into an email only table, and then I also send the verified emails through personated component, which is where the enrichment happens, and that goes to a separate table that you'll see shortly. So I'll just bring up the global verify component here real quick. As I said before, it does name, address, phone, and email all at once potentially, but just for today, we have email. Standard SSIS things, you just choose your input column, set our options, name all the output columns. I like to pass through some sort of unique identifier, like a primary key, and the original data just for comparison. And then you name the output column, or the column for just our results, and you are good to go. I'll just run this real quick. So like I said, list of emails, global email, I send the results to another table, and I use the verified emails to enrich them using another component that I'll discuss near the end of the presentation that goes into another table. And as you'll see, this will just take a second. There we are. And if I go into the table here. You'll see even just global email by itself does a good amount of enrichment. Since we do return the WHOIS data, we cut up the email into those different parts, of course. Even without WHOIS, we give you the type of the top level domain, which is the thing after the last period. So commas commercial, CA's Canada, things like that. That's our results. Actually, I think you need to run that again for Personator. I'll just leave that running. And an interesting note about top level domains. A lot of the top level domains are so-called domain hacks, which mean domains that read as phrases of wordplay. And those are actually a lot of country code domains. Things like .me, .me, .tv, .io. Some startup in San Francisco could have the domain, something.me, and the address of that domain, according to WHOIS, could actually point to Montenegro because ME is the abbreviation for Montenegro. If this hypothetical startup didn't provide their own address to WHOIS. There we are. And while we're here, I'll just show the personator component real quick as well. Same kind of deal, you just select your input. Today we're doing only email. I'm doing the full range of personator options. You have your output. I selected everything for the demo. Pass-through columns, again, pass the unique identifier and the original data. And name the output results column. And then that goes into a table like this. And you can see from just a single email, a good amount of them have a full address, names, sometimes even phone numbers appended, which of course is the point of enrichment. And we'll cover that more closely shortly. And as you saw, even though I didn't do it, you can have a solution up and running in literally minutes. Now, back to the PowerPoint. For enrichment, which is what we'll discuss now, here are some quick percentages on that same data set actually. Just under 30% went from a single email address to at least a real name and a physical address, and a small but significant minority even got a phone number. And just over 30% got some form of demographic data appended. This could be anything from political party, estimated household income, whether they're married or not, estimated number of children within the household. And of the types of personal data, the four main types, name, address, phone, and email, email tends to be the least fruitful for enrichment, but even then you get 30% with the name and address. This mainly because emails are relatively anonymous just by nature, but that of course goes double when an email is specifically designed to be anonymous. Either way, this kind of enrichment can give incredibly valuable focus to something like a marketing campaign, whether it's based on location or the demographic information that we mentioned. But so, like I said, the marketing campaign can gain focus. If you need to say, I don't want to get into politics, but say advertise only to people within a certain income bracket, you can use our demographic information to do that. All right, that's almost all from me. I'll wrap up with a quick reiteration of some broad options and considerations for integration that I mentioned throughout the presentation. The main restriction here is that no one would ever use SSIS for an onboarding process. I guess theoretically, probably, no one would want to do that. But that's exactly what the API excels at, quick single email requests. The API can be used for bulk processing too, but SSIS is probably the better choice here, unless you have a use case that demands customization beyond what's possible in SSIS or SQL Server. And of course, SSIS is mainly intended for general data management and bulk processing, especially when integrated with SQL Server jobs and all that. So, and about email verification in general, I think it's safe to say that email verification is the rare thing that's both relatively easy and cheap, yet immediately beneficial. A little email verification at the start of an email's lifecycle in your database avoids many, many problems later. And with the possibility of enrichment, emails can be a cheap, easy to come by source of very valuable and more expensive data. All right, that's about it for me. I'll hand it back to Jeremy for possible Q&A and things like that.
Awesome, thank you so much. We're going to start off here with a quick poll. I'll push this out to the community here real quick. So if you're interested in learning more about the Melissa solutions, please feel free to uh, fill out the poll. The first is you're interested in a free trial. Second is a personal demo. Third is pricing information. Fourth is yes, but not right now. And fifth is not at this time. So if everyone could please take a minute here to vote, we definitely would appreciate it. There again, whether you're interested in a free trial, a personal demo, or pricing information, please do let us know. We do have a couple questions. One comment though was related to getting access to the recording. As all the MS SQL Tips events are, they are all live. Um, and we will be sending out an email later today to check out the recording as well as download Valentine's slides. So definitely be on the lookout for that. We did have a question too that you sort of did cover, which was personators control, and you did give a demo of showing the personator control. So there's another question too there again from the same community member related to personator. Is
Mhm.
any of that information actually proprietary or secret that's actually returned back from, I assume, SSIS in that context?
No, it just returns standard personal data, so that carries its own, sort of common sense regulations, really. But yeah, it's just name, physical address, and phone number. And Personator takes is actually, I mean, you could have an hour webinar just on Personator alone, but that's for probably my colleague who's a product manager of that. But you can pass into Personator things like social security number or other international equivalents. And of course, you can, if you start with a name and address, you pass that into Personator. So just all the standard confidentiality rules apply there. And we're fully compliant with all that, obviously.
Awesome, awesome. Just want to remind everyone we do have some handouts in the GoToWebinar controls. The first one being getting started with global email validation. So please feel free to take a look at that. Something to take with you right now to get there to get more information about getting started with the Muscle Global Email Verification Solutions. Did have another question too, as you brought up just about GDPR compliance.
Mhm.
So is the email global, is Melissa's email global verification tool actually GDPR compliant?
Yes, it global email specifically actually in Europe exceeds GDPR regulations, current GDPR. We went a step further as a form of future proofing because we anticipate it might get more strict in the future. But as a company, Melissa is fully GDPR compliant.
Awesome. Another question too is related to the email list that you guys have. Can you give us some sense of how much that grows on a regular basis?
That's it's not quite regular. It grows anywhere from just 500,000 to maybe even 3 to 4 million every 7 to 10 days. It's not quite regular. It's a massive copy job, so it's actually sort of in a queue of other massive jobs, so that's why it varies. But yeah, it's constantly growing, minimum twice a month.
And that's at a 500,000 emails at
Half
a
a million is the
minimum.
smallest I've seen, and I've seen a couple that get up into the millions.
Awesome, awesome. Had another question too related to countries that you're covered. So there again, is there any, as opposed to some of the other products that Melissa has, is there anything country related to email, or is your list of emails global?
The email list is global. I mean, emails by their nature are not usually tied to a country. With the WHOIS information, you can, and actually outside of WHOIS, we do return a response field called privacy flag, which is when the domain would be covered by something like GDPR or the other privacy regulations you see around. So like your email at yahoo.co.uk would just have a privacy flag set to Y. So usually that's not a concern with just an email, but that's for the user if they need to maybe store or handle the email differently for say European users.
Okay, great. Well, at this point in time, just want to ask if there's any last minute questions, if you can please post them in the questions portion or go to webinar controls. We're going to go ahead and wrap up. Just want to ask everyone that if you have not had a chance to vote, please vote at this time. Actually, I'll just push out a quick message to everyone. Please cast your vote for. I'll push that out here real quick. So if everyone could please do that, that'd be great. And we'll go ahead and wrap up here in about 10 seconds or so. Just give everybody a chance to vote. Valentine, definitely want to thank you so much for taking time to put your session together. You definitely did a great job, even with the Visual Studio issues. So I really appreciate the time you took. You really had a very informative session. So thank you.
That's my pleasure.
Also, Absolutely. I also want to thank Melissa for sponsoring today's event. So I'm going to go ahead and close today's poll. So this is Jeremy Cadlick. I just want to thank everyone from the community for joining today's event. Please tell a friend about MS SQL Tips and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.